The people who want power the most are the least fit to have it, not as a cynical observation, not as a frustrated comment on a particular politician or a particular era, as a precise philosophical claim about the relationship between the desire for power and the capacity to use it well. Think about what it means to want power deeply, to organize your life around acquiring it, to feel its absence as a wound and its presence as the resolution of something that has been wrong for a long time, to need it in the specific way that the soul needs what it believes will finally make it whole. That need, that specific hunger, is not a neutral quality in a leader. It is not simply ambition in a benign sense, the honest desire to do important work at a significant scale. It is something more specific and more dangerous than that. It is the appetitive soul, or the wounded thumos, or both, having decided that power is the thing that will finally resolve what has never been resolved. That authority over others will provide what was missing in the self. That being chosen by the many will heal whatever was broken by the few. And Plato's observation, made across 2,500 years of distance, with a clarity that has not been improved upon since, is this: the soul that needs power is precisely the soul that power destroys. And the destruction of that soul, when it happens at the scale of genuine power, does not stay private. It becomes your problem, and mine, and everyone else's who lives within the reach of what that soul decides. Begin with something Plato observed that most political analysis still refuses to take seriously. Power does not corrupt neutral people. This is the comfortable version of the story. The idea that someone starts clean, acquires power, and is then gradually changed by it into something they were not before. That power is a corrupting external force that acts on an otherwise healthy soul and produces, over time, the familiar pathologies of the long-tenured leader: the arrogance, the detachment, the treatment of other people as instruments, the growing inability to hear anything that contradicts the preferred self-image. Plato would say that story gets the causation backwards. Power does not create the corruption. It reveals it. It amplifies what was already there. It removes the constraints that kept the existing disorder of the soul from fully expressing itself, and then steps back as the soul expands into whatever shape its deepest structure has always been inclined toward. The person who becomes monstrous with power was not made monstrous by it. They were always organized around something that power would eventually make visible. And the tragedy is not just that corrupt leaders do damage, though they do enormous damage. The tragedy is that the specific qualities that drive people to seek power aggressively, the hunger for validation, the wound in thumos that needs to be healed by dominance, the appetitive soul that has decided authority is the form satisfaction must take. These qualities are precisely the ones that make a person compelling to follow. They project certainty. They promise resolution. They carry the specific energy of someone who needs to win so badly that they will fight for it in ways that more psychologically integrated people simply will not. And crowds whose own thumos is activated and looking for direction mistake that energy for strength. It is not strength. It is need wearing strength's clothing. Plato developed his analysis of corrupt leadership through the same framework he used to understand everything else about the human condition. The soul is three parts: rational, spirited, appetitive. In the ordered soul, reason leads. Thumos serves the direction reason has chosen. Appetite is met genuinely, without being allowed to govern. In the disordered soul, either thumos or appetite, or both together, have displaced reason from its governing position. The soul is still fully functional in many respects. It can be intelligent, articulate, socially skilled, strategically capable, but its direction is no longer set by genuine wisdom. It is set by need. And the specific need that drives most people who seek power aggressively is located in thumos. Recall what thumos is: the spirited part of the soul, the source of pride, honor, the burning need for recognition, the part that feels every slight as a wound and every victory as temporary relief from the fear of insufficiency, the part that drives the relentless proving, the status-seeking, the inability to rest in the face of a hierarchy not yet climbed. The person with wounded thumos, the person whose early life installed a deep and unexamined belief that they are not quite enough, that they must prove themselves constantly to earn the right to exist without shame, that being ordinary is a kind of death. That person is not drawn to power as an incidental feature of their career. They are driven to it by something that feels, from the inside, like ambition and vision and the genuine desire to make a difference. But underneath those genuine qualities, which may also be real, is the engine that actually runs the pursuit. The need to be undeniably significant. The need to reach a position so high that the original wound, the original verdict that they were not enough, can finally be overruled by evidence that cannot be disputed. Power, they believe somewhere below conscious thought, will finally settle the question. Here is what Plato would want you to understand about why it never does. The wound in thumos is not caused by insufficient status. It cannot be healed by sufficient status. The wound is internal, structural. It was formed in specific experiences of being seen and found insufficient, usually very early, usually by people whose judgment the young soul had no choice but to internalize. And it does not respond to external evidence the way a rational argument responds to a counter-argument. You cannot prove your way out of it. Every achievement, every promotion, every expansion of power and influence arrives and provides, briefly, the relief of temporary validation. The anxiety quiets. The proving stops for a moment. Something in the soul exhales, and then the question returns. Not loudly, not always consciously, but with the specific persistence of something that was never actually addressed. Still there, still asking, still generating the low-level hum of insufficiency that the next achievement will need to resolve. And because the wound was never about the external position to begin with, no external position can resolve it. The leader who needed to become president in order to finally feel like enough discovers, upon becoming president, that the question is still there, that the thing they were running toward was always ahead of them and is still ahead of them now, that the scale of the position has expanded, but the feeling of inadequacy, quieter perhaps, more carefully managed, has not disappeared. It has simply found new forms to express itself in, new threats to detect, new rivals to diminish, new displays of dominance to perform, new loyalty tests to impose, new evidence of disrespect to punish. Because thumos, when it is running a soul, does not recognize satisfaction. It only recognizes threat. And a wounded thumos in a position of genuine power is one of the most dangerous configurations in human political life. Add to this the dynamic of appetite, and Plato's picture of corrupt leadership becomes complete. He described a specific trajectory for the soul that pursues power from disorder, a trajectory that moves through stages, each one a further fall from genuine wisdom, each one driven by the specific logic of the disordered soul, amplified by increasing power. In the beginning, there is something that looks like genuine leadership. The hunger for significance produces real energy, real drive, real willingness to work harder than anyone else. The wounds in thumos produce a sensitivity to the needs of the crowd, because the wounded soul knows how it feels to be overlooked and can speak to that experience with genuine resonance. The appetitive energy produces charisma, the specific quality of someone who is fully present to what they want and unapologetic about wanting it. People follow this. They respond to it. They feel, in the presence of someone driven this powerfully by this kind of need, that they are in the presence of someone who will fight for things, who will not stop, who is not safe in the careful, managed way that more cautious leaders are safe. And they are right that such a person will fight. The question they have not asked is what they will fight for once the external constraints are removed. Because Plato observed that the disordered soul, when it acquires genuine power, does not become more ordered. It becomes more itself. The appetites that were managed while power was being pursued begin, once power is achieved, to express themselves more fully. The discipline that characterized the ascent is revealed, gradually, to have been not genuine self-governance, but strategic self-presentation. The hunger for validation that was previously directed at winning the crowd begins to evolve into the hunger for domination that no longer needs the crowd's consent. And thumos, which was wounded before power and is still wounded after it, now has the resources to respond to its wounds not by healing them, but by making sure no one can ever wound it again, by removing the conditions under which it could be wounded, by eliminating the independence of anyone who might not validate it, by constructing a reality, using genuine power over genuine institutions, in which the mirror only reflects what the wound needs to see. Plato called this the tyrant's trap. The soul that pursued power to resolve its disorder finds, in the possession of power, only the amplification of that disorder. and having no internal resources with which to govern itself, it turns its power outward, toward controlling everything that previously it could not control, toward making the external world match the internal need. The tyrant is not a monster from the beginning. The tyrant is a wounded soul with no reason leading it and no limit on what it can reach. There is a specific dynamic Plato described that explains why this corruption so often happens invisibly, slowly, in ways that the people around the leader recognize too late. He called it the problem of the flatterer. In the early stages of a leader's rise, they receive genuine feedback. People around them push back. Peers disagree. The environment contains real friction, real resistance, real information about where the leader's judgment is wrong or incomplete. This friction is, in Plato's framework, the external equivalent of reason within the soul. It is the corrective mechanism that keeps the other parts from running unchecked. It is the thing that says from outside what a genuinely ordered soul would say from inside. Not this direction, not this decision. Look more carefully at what you are missing. But as power increases, this friction decreases. Not because the leader's judgment improves, because the social calculus around the leader shifts. The people who tell inconvenient truths are the people who bear the cost of telling them. The people who validate and agree are the people who receive reward. Over time, selection pressure produces an environment in which the leader is surrounded, almost entirely, by people whose professional survival depends on telling them what they want to hear. And the leader, whose thumos was always hungry for validation, whose wound was always scanning the environment for evidence that the question of insufficiency had finally been answered, does not experience this shift as a loss. They experience it as finally being understood, finally being surrounded by people who see things clearly, by loyal allies rather than envious critics, by the inner circle that has been earned through the years of proving and fighting and demonstrating what the doubters refuse to see. The flatterers are not experienced as flatterers. They are experienced as the first people honest enough to tell the truth. And at that point, Plato says, the corruption is complete, not because the leader became evil, because the internal mechanism that could have corrected the disorder has been systematically eliminated from the external environment, and there was never enough internal mechanism to compensate for its absence. The soul now has no reason leading it, and no external friction to substitute for reason. It has only its wounds, its appetites, and the power to act on them without limit. This is where Plato's analysis connects to the present moment in a way that is worth sitting with carefully, because what he described as the pathology of individual corrupt leadership is now visible as the operating logic of entire systems. The attention economy, the structure of modern media, the specific architecture of political communication in the digital age, all of these have been built in ways that systematically reproduce, at civilizational scale, the dynamic Plato identified in the individual corrupt soul. Every platform that harvests emotional activation has an interest in producing leaders whose primary skill is generating that activation. Leaders who understand that outrage travels faster than analysis, that fear is more viral than hope, that the specific pleasure of having an enemy, of being in a group that has identified a threat and united against it, is one of the most powerful and most reliable forms of engagement available. These are not leaders who have ordered their souls. These are leaders who have learned to weaponize the disorder of other people's souls, who have discovered that the wounded thumos of the crowd responds to certain stimuli with the reliability of a reflex, and who have organized their entire political existence around producing those stimuli. Plato would recognize this immediately, not because he predicted digital media, but because he understood the underlying psychology that digital media has simply given new and more powerful tools. The flatterer at civilizational scale. The leader whose primary offering is not wisdom, but the satisfaction of the crowd's existing appetite. Not the doctor who prescribes what is needed, the confectioner who provides what is desired, and the specific danger, the one Plato kept returning to with the patient insistence of someone who had watched it happen and understood what came next, is that the crowd cannot easily tell the difference. Because the confectioner feels better. The doctor asks you to change. The confectioner tells you that nothing needs to change except who is in charge. And the appetitive soul, which has been looking for relief from discomfort without the cost of genuine transformation, chooses the confectioner every time, until the consequences of that choice become impossible to ignore. By which point, Plato observed, it is usually very late. There is a portrait Plato drew of the genuinely fit leader that stands in direct contrast to everything described above. He called this figure the philosopher king, not a king in the hereditary sense, not a philosopher in the sense of someone who reads books, but a specific type of soul that has done a specific type of work and arrived through that work at a specific kind of character. The philosopher king is not someone who wanted power. This is the first and most important thing Plato said about them. The soul that is genuinely fit to lead is precisely the soul that has to be persuaded to lead. That would prefer, given the choice, to continue the philosophical work of understanding rather than the political work of governing. That does not need the validation of the crowd because it has found something more stable and more nourishing than validation. Truth. The genuine philosopher, the soul that has done the work of ordering itself and following the arguments wherever they lead, regardless of how uncomfortable the destination, has discovered that the hunger for recognition that drives the wounded thumos is a hunger that cannot be satisfied by recognition, and that the peace available to a soul in genuine contact with truth, the specific stillness of a mind that has stopped performing and started seeing, is more valuable than any position of external authority. This soul does not need to lead, and that is precisely what makes it fit to. Because leadership, in Plato's framework, is not a reward. It is a burden, a responsibility that the ordered soul accepts, not because it provides something the soul needs, but because the soul, having developed genuine wisdom and genuine concern for the common good, recognizes that the city needs what it has to offer. The philosopher king leads from fullness rather than from hunger, from wisdom rather than from wound, from genuine concern for the people being governed rather than from the need to be validated by them. And here's the most important thing Plato said about this figure and about the entire question of who should lead. The philosopher king is not primarily a political category, it is a psychological one. The work of becoming genuinely fit to govern others begins with becoming genuinely fit to govern yourself. The internal order of the soul, reason leading, thumos directed toward worthy goals, appetite acknowledged and met genuinely without being allowed to determine direction, this is not preparation for leadership. This is leadership, applied to the only domain you have direct access to, your own inner republic. Plato believed that every individual soul is a political system, that the question of who rules inside you, which part of the soul is actually in charge, is the same question as who rules a city, and that the answer to that question determines everything else about what kind of life you live and what kind of impact you have on the people around you. The person who has not learned to govern themselves, who is still run by wounded thumos and ungoverned appetite, who still reaches for power in any domain as a way of resolving something unresolved inside them, that person does not become a better version of themselves by acquiring authority over others. They become a larger version of what they already are, and what they already are gets applied at the scale of their authority to everyone within their reach. This is why Plato was not pessimistic about human nature in the simple sense. He was not saying that most people are bad. He was saying that most people have not done the specific work that genuine governance requires, and that a political system which does not take this seriously, which treats the desire for power as a qualification rather than a warning sign, which confuses the energy of the wound with the steadiness of wisdom, is a system that will reliably produce the outcomes he described. Not because of bad luck, because of bad structure. What does this mean for how you think about the leaders in your life and in your world? Plato is not asking you to become politically disengaged. He is not suggesting that wisdom is so rare that the whole project of governance should be abandoned. He is asking you to apply a more precise lens to the question of who you follow and why. The leader who projects absolute certainty, who has an enemy for every problem and a simple answer for every complexity, who responds to challenge with contempt rather than engagement, who requires loyalty rather than inviting scrutiny, who treats disagreement as betrayal and criticism as evidence of bad faith. These are not signs of strength. They are the specific behavioral signatures of wounded thumos in a position it is using to manage the wound rather than to serve the people it was given power to serve. You can feel this from the inside when you are in the presence of it, not always clearly. The charisma is real. The energy is real. The sense of being in the presence of someone who will fight without stopping is real. But underneath it, If you are paying attention with the quality of attention Plato is describing, you can feel the hunger, the specific quality of a soul that needs something from you, rather than offering something to you. That needs your validation, your loyalty, your confirmation that it is as significant as it requires itself to be. That need is not leadership. It is recruitment into the management of someone else's wound. And what does it mean for how you think about your own relationship to power? This is the question Plato is really asking. Not just about the leaders above you, about the leader inside you. In whatever domain you have authority, however small or large, what is the soul you are bringing to it? Are you leading from fullness or from hunger? From genuine concern for the people in your care, or from the need to have them confirm something you have not yet been able to confirm for yourself? Are the people around you freer in your presence or more carefully managed? Do you invite the friction that keeps you honest, or have you, gradually and with the best intentions, arranged your environment to minimize the resistance that would tell you things you do not want to hear? Is your leadership an expression of who you genuinely are at your most ordered, most clear, most genuinely concerned with the common good? Or is it a performance of leadership, sophisticated and perhaps convincing, but organized underneath around what leading makes you feel about yourself? These are not comfortable questions. Plato was not interested in comfortable questions. He was interested in true ones. And the true ones, the ones that actually produce something when you sit with them, honestly, are always the ones that ask not about others, but about you. The psychology of power, understood as Plato understood it, leads to a conclusion that is simultaneously humbling and clarifying. The corruption of leaders is not primarily a moral failure. It is a structural one. It is what happens when souls that have not done the work of genuine self-governance acquire the ability to govern others. When the wound that was looking for healing finds authority instead. When the appetite that was looking for satisfaction finds abundance instead. When the thumos that was looking for undeniable significance finds a platform instead. In each case, the external acquisition does not resolve the internal disorder. It expresses it, at whatever scale is available. And the remedy is not a better selection process for leaders, though that matters. It is not a stronger system of external checks, though those matter too. The remedy begins inside, with the individual soul asking the questions that ordered souls ask, with the practice of genuine self-governance that makes genuine governance of anything else possible, with the slow, unglamorous, deeply unfashionable work of examining your own hunger for power in whatever form it takes, and asking what it is actually for. What wound is it trying to heal? What question is it trying to answer? What verdict is it trying to overturn? And then asking whether power, in any form, in any amount, is actually capable of answering that question, or whether the question requires something that no external position can provide, something internal, something built through the specific discipline of ordering your own soul, rather than acquiring authority over other people's. Plato's answer was quiet and consistent across everything he wrote. The only power that heals the wound is the power that was never about other people to begin with. The power of genuine self-knowledge. The power of a soul that has stopped needing to be confirmed by the world because it has found, through the difficult and necessary work of philosophy, something more stable than confirmation. Truth. That is not a comfortable answer. It does not provide the relief that power promises. But it is the only one that actually delivers what power pretends to offer. And recognizing the difference in yourself and in the people you choose to follow is perhaps the most important political act available to any individual. Not because it changes everything immediately, but because a person who has learned to see that difference clearly is a person who can no longer be recruited into the management of someone else's wound. And that, Plato would say, is where genuine freedom begins. Not in the political system, in the soul that has finally stopped mistaking hunger for strength.